Ready to rock? Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Grab a water or a coffee if you haven't got one, and we'll get started with our second debate. Okay, welcome to part two. Are we ready? Yeah? Okay. All right. The theme of our second debate, well, before we get going, I actually wanted to give some update about the last debate. So the AI debate, I got the official numbers at the end. We'd started with the boosting versus breeding laziness, and boosting learning started with 48%, breeding laziness was 52%, but at the end of the debate, the official numbers are back. It was 57% for boosting and 43% for breeding laziness. So apparently a few people switched their minds. So we'll see if the same thing happens today on our robotics topic debate. Couple of opening remarks from me, just to say that on March 18th in San Jose, California, the NVIDIA CEO, Jensen Huang, stood up in front of the world and said, everything in the future that moves is going to be robotic. And that's a big deal, I think, because NVIDIA is a huge company that is selling a lot of GPU units and GPUs. I was looking at the stock ticker, and over the last 2 years, their stock has gone up almost 500%, although the last few weeks has sort of put a dent in that. So we'll see if the sentiment is changing. But apparently, even AI people think that maybe there's something to robotics in the future, although robotics seems to have been moving along maybe slowly. At least that seems to be the perception. I mean, the panacea, the promised panacea of like level 5 autonomous driving has been forever, I think now, it seems, on the promised next thing that we're going to be able to buy, and it's going to be usable, and it's just, there's always another few more months before we actually see that, or maybe never. And so maybe, I myself have been working in mobile robotics for 25 years now, I think, working on autonomous vehicles, and there's so much left to solve, right? So I also wanted to bring up a quote that I thought was really interesting, and I'm going to get the name wrong, but it's Joanna Maciejowska, and she's an author, a sci-fi author. I'm into sci-fi authors today, apparently Ted Chiang and now Joanna. But she made this tweet that apparently went viral, and I really loved it, so I thought I'd repeat it because it kind of fits today's debate. And she said, this was on March 29th, so not long ago, she said, you know what the biggest problem with pushing all things AI is? It's the wrong direction. I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can do art and writing, not for AI to do my art and writing so that I can do my laundry and dishes. As a roboticist, and I'll fully put my bias out there, to me that said, oh, what you want is robots, right? So we'll see. I don't know. Is robots really slowly lagging behind, or are they just at the beginning? I'm not so sure. So that's the topic of today's debate. Ace of Pace is AI skyrocketing. No doubt the debate this morning helps a little bit with that, while robotics inches forward. And on the yes side, we have on my right, and on the no side, we have on my left. So I'll start with right. We have Matthew Pan, assistant prof in the Queen's Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering, human-robot interactions expert, came to us not too long ago from Disney, and a faculty member here at Ingenuity Labs. And then Yue Hu, assistant prof in Department of Mechanical Engineering at the University of Waterloo, also joining us now to participate in one of our new CREATE grants. So we're happy to have you here today and debate on the yes side. On the no side, I'll start with John. So John Gamble, a new faculty member here at Queen's in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering, Ingenuity Labs faculty member as well, and joined us recently from Oxford. And then my good friend and colleague, Ina Sharf, who agreed to join us, thank you, from McGill University in mechanical department there, sort of an aerospace mechanical robotics researcher with many years of experience, so I'm looking forward to hearing her thoughts on this topic. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. The debate format is the same. We're going to give 5 minutes to each panelist to argue their case, and then we'll have a sort of middle period where they can then argue back and forth, a little bit of a freely but yet moderated discussion, and then we'll have a wrap up with some closing remarks before we kind of go general and let you, the audience, jump in, ask your questions, and can have more of an open conversation, because I'm sure pushing these two groups apart is maybe not as comfortable as they'd like it, or maybe it is. I'm not sure. We'll find out. I think we're going to start with the yes side this time. I'll sort of work with Matt, maybe then to John, and then the UA, and then to Ina, if that sounds reasonable. All right, so I will open the floor to Matt. You have 5 minutes. Oh, I did it again. I apologize. We have another poll to start off. So is AI skyrocketing while robotics inches forward? Is it yes or no in your mind before the debate starts? If we can get your thoughts and use that QR code, there are a bunch of pages around. Or does anybody have a paper they can pass along? If you've got an extra piece of paper and someone needs a QR code, pass it back or aside. How are we doing? I can't see.
The yes is winning.
AI is skyrocketing? Oh my. Ina, you're looking nervous now.
I'm going to have a tough job here.
I mean, Jensen Huang is on your side. He owns NVIDIA, or he's the CEO of NVIDIA. I'm not sure it's fair that we put the results up while people are voting, but I mean, that maybe not is a good idea. It's bad science, right?
It biases a bit.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I apologize. I think we're good, yeah, all right. We'll let it stabilize for a second, but I think we can pass it on to Matt.
Okay.
You have 5 minutes. I'm timing you.
Oh, all right.
No.
Okay, so a bit of a disclaimer. Coming off the heels of the last debate, I have to admit I'm a lazy engineer. My preparation for this has been sort of last minute. So I went to ChatGPT and asked it about this debate topic, and it had some very choice words. Your robot is so slow, by the time it learns to dance, the robot would be considered a classical dance form. Your robot is so slow, it thinks cutting-edge technology is a pair of safety scissors. And possibly one of my favorites, your robot's so slow, when AI says, hey, laser lips, your mama was a snowblower, it takes a day to act out your mama was a toaster in a confusing interpretive dance. And it gives an explanation for this. The playful joke combines the classic slow response theme with a humorous reference from the movie Short Circuit, keeping the tone light and friendly, not to mention also spicy. So I'm arguing the yes side, that AI is indeed skyrocketing, and for my argument, I present sort of 3 reasons. Output, money, ubiquity. So in terms of output, I did a really, really quick search in Web of Science, just putting in AI and robotics, and it's able to generate a year-by-year count of how many papers that have been published with each of these keywords. And I believe something similar is presented on the website for this debate. So let me give you a brief visual description of this graph. So starting in 1941, both robotics and AI are all-time lows of 0 publications per year. And then it's fairly consistent until about 1989. Robotics starts trickling up, while AI is still down below. But suddenly, at around 2010, 2013, AI just goes vertical, while robotics, it's still climbing, but not as much as AI. It's pretty clear from, if you've been to any robotics and AI conference, that the amount of publications coming out of AI that have terms like deep learning, machine learning, have drastically outpaced robotics. And this is key. Robotics is staying fairly linear in terms of output over the last few years, while the AI domain, it's papers considered a year old, that are a year old are considered outdated, which is a little bit ridiculous. So that's output. Also, if we're taking a look at H indexes, so the top 13 publication venues in AI outrank the top publication in robotics. The top 13 publications outrank the top 1 publication or venue, which is ICRA, which is an absolutely phenomenal figure. 13 journals and conferences outrank ICRA. Now, let's talk about money. So global investment in AI has been steadily increasing and actually have skyrocketed and peaked in 2021 with a staggering $276 billion investment. This includes minor acquisitions, this includes venture capitalist funding, and small equity funding. Whereas in robotics, it is estimated that the global funding or global investment in robotics is sitting at $46 billion, which is a very, very staggering difference. So there is more money being poured into AI, about 4 or 5 times more. Additionally, venture capitalist funding in robotics has fallen off of a cliff as of 2023. There are no longer very many investment firms that are investing in robotics. In fact, many of these startups in robotics have been failing, starting with, let's say, Willow Garage back in the day, which created the PR2 platform. They're gone. There's a bunch of other companies that are no longer in existence that have pretty promising robotics, general robotics platforms. And lastly, ubiquity. AI is everywhere. As we heard some of the comments in the previous debate, students are using it on their second desktop screen. We have it in the classroom. I have it on this tablet right now. There's a dedicated button on the keyboard to activate AI, ridiculously enough. It is in finance, it is in banking, it is in healthcare, it is everywhere. Where is robotics, aside from being in this room? You don't see it on the streets. You don't see it in our homes, aside from the dinky little iRobot platform that some of us have, but mine is sitting in a basement collecting dust because its edge detector sensor failed. And it's for these 3 reasons these 3 obvious reasons that we can see that AI is drastically outpacing robotics. Now, is this a problem? We should discuss this in the next section.
Okay, thank you, Matt. I will pass it to the no side. John.
I think you put it well in your introduction, Josh, that this is a question of perception. So Matt, I thank you for picking those metrics, and it wasn't my intent, but I'd like to go through a few of them at least a little bit quickly. You said output. I think you are conflating quality and quantity together. Lots of output doesn't mean it's quality output. Money, famously, VCs expect to lose money on the majority of their investments, and they specifically look for companies that will return a high success if they are successful and otherwise will fail. And robotics are grounded in the physical world. They do not scale infinitely, which also comes to your ubiquity comment. Robots are physical things. We cannot just copy them tonight into a million different devices. We have to physically build them, which means we limit them. So because this is a problem of perception, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about some successes of robotics. So we might not see them in the everyday world, but that's because they are successful in places where we don't see them, and when they're successful, we don't know them. So Amazon uses over 1 million robotics in all its warehouses. It has more robots than it has employees in the fulfillment centers. On the same branch, Ocado, which is a UK grocery retail, they deliver 60,000 orders a day in the UK. That's up 10% from the previous year. They can fulfill a 50-item order in under 5 minutes. They have 1 million UK customers. They have 10 UK fulfillment centers. Every one of those UK fulfillment centers has 2,000 to 3,000 robots that completely pick the order when it's put in and put it on the truck for it to go out for delivery. They succeed in 99% perfect order, which they define a perfect order as being on time and as ordered. So you get what you want when you were supposed to get it. There's obviously Roomba, 50 million robots in 20 years. You could argue that's had a long time coming, but these are physical things we had to build. When they break, I can't put a software update to fix the broken sensor. These are physical things. They take time, but they are used throughout the world, just in ways that are maybe less ubiquitous. And there's also lots of applications that we just don't think about because we are in a different part of the world. So who here has heard of Zipline? Anyone? Actually, more than I was expected. So Zipline is a drone delivery company, mainly operating in Africa. They got their start in Rwanda. They deliver supply chain critical items like vaccines, blood products, and medicines throughout Rwanda, which is a relatively small country, but a very poorly connected country when it comes to infrastructure. And so they have flown over 110 million kilometers autonomously. They service, this one's a little bit out of date, but they service up to 21 hospitals. They're up to 80 kilometers away from the fulfillment center, flying 20 to 40 flights a day. They have a less than 1% failure rate where a flight fails and have to come down to the ground. In Ghana last year, they delivered 1 million COVID vaccines in a single year to hospitals. These are reducing the wastes in the healthcare systems. Things like blood products quickly go bad. In countries that don't have strong infrastructure, they lose a lot of their blood products, and they don't have a lot of blood product to begin with, and they can't afford to lose it. We can also think about things outside this world, right? So the human race has never visited Mars. We can debate whether we ever actually will, but we sent rovers there, and we've learned so much from those rovers. Factual things, not just statistical inferences, right? Spirit, opportunity, curiosity, perseverance, and more recently, Ingenuity. Together, the 4 rovers have flown over 100 kilometers, and they've been in operation in combined for over, I didn't do this math in advance, for over 40 years, almost 40 years in combined operation. Curiosity and Perseverance are still running. Ingenuity, first ever aircraft to fly on another planet, has flown for, the mission lasted for 2 years and 3/4, or 2.75 years. It had 2 hours total of flight. It flew 17 kilometers. This is what robotics is. Yes, it's never going to appear on every single cell phone because it is physical things. And when it works right, we won't see it because that is what it's supposed to do. Because when it works right, it can't fail. That is the definition of robotics. We can't be 75% successful. We can't be even 95% successful for these things to work. And I think to try to compare the two when they have different constraints and they have fundamentally different metrics is challenging at best.
Thank you, John. All right. Yue, you have the opportunity now, 5 minutes.
All right, so I'm gonna piggyback on some of the things that have been said up to now, and especially I want to address why I think robots are going slow, in the sense that I'm gonna actually piggyback on some of the things that have been said by John, which are the problems of physical systems, in the sense that AI is AI as we know it, like we have talked about ChatGPT, and I'm sure that people here know about Alexa, you know about Siri, you know about Google. I mean, you're probably using all of these. I talk to my Google Home every day, asking about the weather. That is the active use of AI on a daily basis. I also have a Roomba at home, but I hate it because it behaves really badly. Cannot manage to map my room properly. Has a lot of physical issues, and I think that's part of the issue, part of the reasons for which robots are going slower is because of the physical embodiment, in the sense that when we bring things on a physical system, we have to deal, as you also said, that we cannot just be 75% sure that it's working. We have to be possibly 99.9% sure that it's going to work the whole time, and that's not the case. So robots are going slower because they just have these kind of physical limitations. From the other side, AI is going much faster because it has, let's say, quote unquote, more application domains, more software-related domains that we can use in systems that are not strictly related to physical systems directly. We have, as I just mentioned, voice assistants, we have ChatGPT, we have all those applications, and we have a lot of applications in robotics as well, right? Like a lot of robotics applications are, let's say, again, quote unquote, don't quote me too much on this, dependent on some of the AI development. Like if we want robots to have perception, you want to talk to your robot, we have seen so much development in humanoid robots recently, right? There's all these companies popping out. There's a lot of investments going in there. Probably not as much investment as is going in the AI domain, but a lot of investment is going into those humanoid robots that are coming out. There's so many companies. I honestly have never seen so many companies in humanoid robots, and never in my PhD life where I worked on humanoid robots thought that one day this could be the case. But we do have to admit that a lot of those advancements we felt it was ready, or it was kind of time to push forward some of those robotics technologies because AI has reached a certain point of development. Like, we are pushing forward some of the boundaries because we have now machine learning tools, thanks to our also increased computational power, which is strictly linked, of course, to the development of AI. I mean, it's no wonder that only in more recent times we have seen such boost in the AI growth. But I feel that robotics has been a little bit lacking in speed because we didn't have that boost in the machine learning domain and in the computational resources domain. There's a lot of physical constraints. Aside from the, let's say, problems that we may have with physical system, there's also the fact that having a physical system that is an embodiment of something also automatically incurs into regulatory issues, in the sense that we have laws that probably, we have heard that also from this morning's keynote, that if you want to deploy a robot out there, you must respect some safety rules. I'm not saying that for AI this is not the case, but definitely the boundaries that we're seeing are much softer in a way, right? We somehow can push forward much more of the AI side of things without having to incur into physical damages of the word. While if we, if you are just talking to your ChatGPT, you may have less issues. But if you have a humanoid robot helping you doing stuff at home and does something wrong, physically speaking, that's gonna having much more consequences, at least from a regulatory perspective, with respect to having just using AI. So yeah, I guess I would throw it there as a sort of controversial-ish statement that AI is pushing robotics forward, but can robotics push AI forward?
Thank you, Yue. All right. Ina.
So I'm going to take a slightly different tack, and I think, I'm not going to argue that AI has not been growing very fast over the last decade. I admit that it has been. But what I'm going to argue is that in the near future, AI is going to run into serious serious obstacles, which are going to slow down the rate of the growth of this industry. And I'm going to give you 3 arguments. So my first argument is going to be based on an emerging technical constraint, which is data availability. So I think probably most of you know that the progress in large language model development, which is kind of the thing that we associate with AI the most, has relied heavily on unsupervised training on vast amounts of human-generated data. And most of this data comes from the web. Now, this time, there's sort of a consensus emerging that the amounts of new human-generated data are going to be falling short of the data sizes required to train new and bigger LLMs. And this is going to happen in the next few years. I've seen predictions that say in 2028 this is going to happen. The two are going to match. And some predictions are even as early as 2025. So in other words, we are running out of human-generated data for scaling of our machine learning systems. Now, you can say, okay, that's no problem. We can just use synthetic data. But research is showing that the effectiveness of training on synthetic data is actually not so great. It can yield diminishing or even negative returns and worse scaling behavior. So basically, I think the data constraint is going to put a pretty sizable, pretty large damper onto further growth of AI. My second argument, I'm very happy you touched on regulations. So my second argument is actually based on the current lack of regulations and standards on safe and responsible use and development of AI systems. So first of all, there's no comprehensive no comprehensive federal legislature or regulations for AI, neither in US nor in Canada at this point. So as a result, we've seen basically an unregulated deployment of this technology, and that's one of the reasons for its fast spread to date, as you had pointed out. However, I think that without checks and bounds enforced by regulations and no international standards, we are setting ourselves up for potential setbacks or even a catastrophic event. And I want to give you a specific example of something that happened to a large company, Rite Aid. Any American would know Rite Aid, but this is a company that runs a chain of pharmacy stores in the US. So from 2012 to 2020, Rite Aid deployed artificial intelligence-based facial recognition technology to identify customers who may have shoplifted. However, because of lack of regulations, the company was reckless in deployment of this technology and they failed to do its own due diligence. So what happened was innocent customers were accused of wrongdoing, and guess what? The AI had a clear bias towards women and people of color for classification as shoplifters. So a complaint was filed to the Federal Trade Commission Bureau of Consumer Protection, and that commission investigated the matter. At this time, the case is still not finalized but the commission is basically proposing a settlement with numerous obligations on Rite Aid. And I want to quote the first two of these. The first one is, Rite Aid may not use the AI-based facial recognition technology for the next 5 years, and Rite Aid and its service providers and third parties have to destroy all data, models, or algorithms derived in whole or in part therefrom. So what this case illustrates to me is how mistaken using AI because of lack of regulations and safety checks can result in a huge setback for deployment of this technology. So I believe this too is going to put a pretty sizable damper on its future growth. My last argument is going to be based on the energy requirements of AI and the corresponding environmental implications. I don't need to tell you that AI is one of the most energy-intensive modern IT undertakings. I also don't need to tell you that we are experiencing more and more severe effects of climate change. So I question whether we can sustain the skyrocketing rate of development and utilization of AI given its energy requirements and the associated environment impact. To give you some statistics, they're not so easy to come by, but some statistics are becoming available. Data centers are estimated to be responsible for up to 3% of global electricity consumption today. The carbon footprint of data centers is the highest it has ever been. It is estimated that data centers generate 3.5% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, and the majority of this is utilized in the IT sector. Now, you might think that 3.5% doesn't sound like much, but I want to put this number into context. Aviation, which is flying, which is one of the most carbon-intensive activities on the planet, contributes 2.5% to greenhouse gas emissions. So given these numbers, I question whether our current and planned electricity supply infrastructures even have the capability to accommodate the energy requirements associated with scaling up of AI systems, and furthermore, whether we can afford the associated carbon footprint of running AI systems. So again, I believe that this is another consideration that's going to significantly slow down the development and deployment of AI.
Thank you, Ina. All right, and thank you to the panelists for your introduction. So now we enter that second phase of the debate where you get to respond to what you've heard from either side, and I'll leave it sort of open to who would like to go first and sort of respond to what they heard in somebody's opening remarks. And if you don't put your hand up, I might just pick you. So, Ina, thank you.
So I actually want to respond to your introductory comment, Josh, which was regarding level 5 driving, autonomous driving. So I strongly believe that the reason we're not at level 5 driving is not because of the robotics, but it's actually because of AI. We are not able to train the AI systems to the level where we can trust them to give us the level 5 driving. So to me, it's not the problem of actuation or sensors or mechatronics or physical embodiment. I see this very much as a problem of AI.
Well, we're kind of already there on all those other things.
Well,
Yeah, well, okay. Anybody want to respond to that? Yeah.
I think, Okay, go.
Go ahead, Yue.
So I would pitch in that, in the sense that my view on that is not that, and I always thought that it's not true that we're not ready for autonomous driving. I mean, system-wise, I think we're ready from both robotics and AI side. It's the people that are not ready. We are not ready to receive autonomous driving because we don't know how to drive properly. Like, if you drive in Toronto or anywhere, to be honest, a lot of people just don't respect traffic rules. So if you want your AI, let's say, to respect traffic rule, which is how we are supposed to do, we're just not doing it. Like, we would just start running into those autonomous driving cars, or they just get stuck in the traffic because of us human drivers. I always thought for that point that if we just replace all the cars with completely autonomous driving cars, we would not have more accidents than what we have now. So I kind of, let's say, think that it's definitely not only the AI, but also not only the physical system. There's more to it that is I guess back to my regulations argument, that there are regulations that are not allowing this to happen as of now, and I think we're actually ready from both ends. Okay. Just to pitch in on the autonomous driving case.
Okay. Anyone?
I also wanted to make the point that I think it has been AI that has gotten us to the point where we are now, where we have companies like Waymo and Cruise and Tesla that are testing out autonomous driving strategies. There's some flaws, but the reason why we're at this point now is because of AI. It's because of these AI that have been trained on real data, on image data, that have gotten us to this point. Now, getting us to level 5, I think, yes, that's an open question, but I think AI has been a very key player in getting us to the point where I can let go of a steering wheel and have the car self-drive according to lanes, according to traffic conditions, et cetera.
So I would actually argue that the reason we're able to do some progress in autonomous driving is because of all the mechatronics and robotics developments, because we have amazing sensor technologies that have become so much smaller, lighter, and cheaper, and that's what's actually enabling the car to be very much like a robot, because it's now able to give you such excellent perception of what's going on around. And that's, without the sensors, none of the AI stuff would have been possible.
No, John? I'm going to ask, I don't know if this is a great question, but is it that AI is, and I heard it sort of over here a little bit, is easy, and robotics is just really hard? Is that a fair statement to make? I don't know, or is that too controversial? And don't throw apples at me, or.
Yes, robotics is very hard. Okay,
You're arguing for the AI side. Is it the AI is easy and therefore it's skyrocketing?
Well, I'm not going to argue that AI is easy, because there's a bunch of AI practitioners here that would want to. But I will say that robotics is hard. And you, in my case, we both work in human-robot interaction. And one thing that has sort of been touched upon, but hasn't been directly addressed is ethics and the human consideration factor, where all the studies that Yue and I work in, it takes months to prepare a single study. Why? Because we need ethics approval to conduct robotic studies that involve human participants, to make sure that these robots are not physically, mentally, or socially harming our participants. Okay, that takes a few months. Okay, in addition to that, it takes months to collect this data from humans, and the data, and I think Yue made this point to me before, that collecting data is hard, especially from human subject participants. She was telling me about a study that she's done that collected 1,000 data points And the robotics community was like, wow, where did you get 1,000 data points? How long must that have taken? Whereas in the AI community, it's like 1,000 data points? That's nothing. That's why are you here? So the robotics part, it takes a long time because you have to get the hardware right. You have to get the software right, whether that's AI or not. The control system right. You have to get the sensors right. And on top of that, you got to make sure that it's safe and it doesn't harm people. Okay? Whereas AI, it's pretty much digital, right? You're working in a digital playground where things are not as messy. So things can move at a much more faster pace than robotics, where we have to deal with clutter, where we have to deal with the formal objects, where we have to deal with people moving around and sensor noise. So there is a difference. And to conclude, yes, I will say that robotics is incredibly hard, which may factor into why it's going much slower.
I'm going to go John first, and then
Yes.
Yue. So John.
So I disagree that the problems are different in difficulty. I think they're both equally hard, and I think it comes back to perception. For whatever reason, the perception of success in AI is set easier than the perception of success in robotics. We accept that ChatGPT is wrong some of the time. Why is that an acceptable answer, right? Like, why do we accept it? Why do we consider that a success if something is correct 80% of the time? We wouldn't do that in robotics. The fundamental problems they're trying to solve are just as hard, but for whatever reason, be it perception, be it marketing, the agreed upon definition of success is different in the two fields, and as a result, robotics is living up to a more challenging standard than maybe AI is.
Yue?
I just want to pitch in there, just to follow up what Matt said, is that the fact that physical robotic systems is hard, and especially backing up the HRI aspects of that, like for which it's so hard to get data. That's also why sim to real is basically a research field by itself, right? Like, you can run stuff in simulation, and everything's fine, everything seems to work. You translate to the physical system, and suddenly nothing works, and you're like, why is it not working? Like, what's working in simulation? So there's literally people working in a domain called sim to real. It wouldn't exist if it was so simple to work on physical systems.
Okay. Ina?
Yeah, so I guess I probably would say that robotics is hard, and I don't want to say harder than AI, but it's definitely hard. And the fact that it is very much about physical embodiment and physical testing and requiring all these physical pieces to work together, I think one of the things that makes it hard. The issue of ethical approvals is interesting because, with robots, it's very easy to see if they harm a human, right? If you get hit by a robotic arm as it, swings around, well, you can actually, kill somebody. But we are, I think, being deceived that ethics is not equally, if not more important for AI systems because, our interaction with AI is so different, right? We're interacting with self-systems. AI can't hurt us physically. And I think that's, we really should be thinking about this a lot more because I think we're being negligent about the ethical side of AI just because it seems like it can't harm us. So.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, and I did want to come back to the regulatory side too, and because you brought that up, I think, on both sides as an issue or a reason why things are, progressing more slowly. And I did like that John brought up that we don't see robots a lot, but I think they are regulated. So maybe do we think the regulatory scenario is playing in favor of AI, or is it sort of playing in favor of robotics? And I'll go to John first.
I think a fundamental difference is a robotic solution most of the time is doing something a human can already do, and so falls under the and so easily is transferred to the regulatory space that applies to humans. But AI is a new technology, and so it's being applied to problems that we don't have regulation for, or it's being applied in ways we don't have regulation for, and so we're talking about having to create new regulation when we don't know we need it yet, versus when we do robotics, it's a car, so we just regulate it like a car, which makes it quicker to get regulated, perhaps.
Okay. Thoughts on the yes side?
I do think that AI has benefited from laxer regulation because it's a new technology. It's something that we haven't, the force of which we haven't really seen until recently. And so regulations, like governments are generally slower to react. And that has benefited the pace of AI technologies, honestly. And it's only recently that I've been hearing that like I'm not in the AI space, but conferences such as NeurIPS requires authors to disclose ethical considerations for the technologies, but that's a more recent phenomenon. And I think that's going to catch up, but so far it's that lax regulation has benefited AI.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any other back and forth people would like to, any points you'd like to make here before we move on to the sort of third phase? Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to point out that another thing that has been sort of hindering robotics research is there's no common platforms, that physical hardware platforms that we're testing on. Like we have an assortment of robots here that are completely different from the assortment of robots that someone else might have a different lab. And so the applicability for a lot of these research findings that we find on one robot may not be applicable to other robots. And so if without this common platform, it does hinder a little bit of the applicability of the research that we do. So just a comment that I just thought of.
And I think I might add benchmarks.
Yeah.
Right? That's another thing that's a lot of benchmarks in the AI community that we don't have the same kind of, yeah, good point. Anyone else? So we're going to move into that third phase. In the third phase, you get sort of 2 to 4 minutes. We'll be a little flexible to give your last final argument, and then we're going to go back to the audience and have them vote again. So make your points well. And then we'll go to the audience and give you a chance to jump into this conversation, tell us what you think, and ask your questions to the panel. Okay, so maybe we'll go in reverse order, and I think Ina was last, so she gets to go first, and then we go back.
Yeah, so, I really think that there are a number of obstacles that AI is going to face, and I've touched on some of them. So data availability constraint, regulatory aspects, and there are others. For example, lack of transparency in AI systems developments. The biggest players in AI are completely secretive about their models, how they train them, how anything was done. And I think this is a problem. I guess, and I also think that to address these challenges really is going to require the research community and the industry and the government representatives and people, the society, to participate in a dialogue to address some of these challenges. And regulation, to me, is a big one, because without regulations, we have complete freedom, and bad things, we're setting up ourselves for bad things to happen. On the other hand, robotics has a history of 60 years or so, and that's one of the reasons why we have regulation and we have standards and we have international bodies that are involved in defining standards. And maybe one other thing that I want to mention is education about AI. Versus education in robotics. Right now, robotics education at primary and high school level is really very much embedded in our education system, and I think this bodes well for robotics. But if you look at AI, there are some initiatives that are starting to be taken for education in primary and high schools, but they're really scattered, and I think the uptake is going to be quite a while. And we really need to be educating the next generation about AI ethics, about AI's capabilities, about what these systems are capable to do. So yeah, I think I'll conclude.
Thank
here.
you. Yeah, well done. Okay, Yue.
Okay. Yeah, so also going back to that regulatory aspects of it, I think we've talked about how robots are not much seen by people, but they are used heavily in the back end. But I think that part of that, we are pushing more for, if you look at the current trends also in robotics research, and a lot of robotics companies, they're making robots for humans. Like if you want, the first one that we have seen around is Roomba. Like everyone here, I think, know what is a Roomba. It's a vacuum cleaner. But you don't see much more in terms of robots that can enter your household or can enter human spaces. And that is because we're not allowing that to happen yet. There's a lot of physical things that can happen when the physical robot enters your space. And I think we will probably have more regulations also for AI in the long term, but from one side, we have also some developments, and I think Ina also early touched upon the energy consumption of training these models, which is absolutely true, but we are also seeing people now working on reducing the size of the models, using alternative computational resources, and so on and so forth. So there is a curve where people are realizing that this is becoming a problem, and so that eventually will hopefully fade out or going towards a more sustainable situation. From the other end, however, in robotics, we are not really looking at the sustainability much. Like, we keep building robots, new robots, different robots, as Matt said, we all have different robots. And none of these maybe will end up anywhere doing anything actually useful, and they just end up being trash, right? Are we thinking about how to make more sustainable robots for the future? Are our robots recyclable? And stuff like that. So this also is something that we, in the domain of robotics, I haven't seen much. We haven't touched upon this topic, so these are all things that I think on the long run we'll have to, it may, again, slow down both ends, but which one will be slower, I don't know. But, are things that I think society is kind of realizing a little bit, but not realizing enough, just because the benefits of not caring about these things is right now greater than caring about them.
Nice. Okay. Thank you, Yue. John, your turn.
All right, thanks. I wanted to do something a little different, so I wanted to tell a story. So I want everyone to picture a spacecraft orbiting Mars. When it first encounters the atmosphere, it's going to be traveling over 5 kilometers a second. Over the next 4 minutes, as it plunges towards the ground, it'll be slowed by the atmosphere, it'll be buffeted by the atmosphere. When it's 12 kilometers from the ground, it's going to be traveling 1,500 kilometers an hour, but it'll finally be able to open a parachute to help slowing itself down. It's still supersonic. The parachute's going to jerk that spacecraft, and over the next 30 seconds, it's going to decelerate down to 500 kilometers an hour. Once it's down at 500 kilometers an hour, it can finally jettison its heat shield, and with its heat shield gone, it can now start measuring the Martian terrain. As it falls, over the next 60 seconds, 8 more kilometers, it's going to have to recognize known landmarks on that Martian terrain. It's going to have to identify unknown hazards, and it's going to have to identify and plan a route to a safe landing spot. At this point, it's now only 2.5 kilometers above the ground, and it's still traveling at 300 kilometers an hour. To slow down further, the spacecraft is actually going to eject its payload and let it fall freely away from the parachute. And then the payload is going to fire rockets to slow down the payload further and to move it over to the landing spot. The rockets will eventually slow the payload to a stop, not on the ground, but 20 meters above the ground, at which point the rocket's going to hold this payload steady while a 1,000 kilogram rover is lowered with a winch down to the ground. This is all going to happen within 7 minutes of when it first touches the atmosphere. Once the rover's on the ground, the cables disconnect, the payload flies away, crashes safely somewhere away from the rover, and a $2 billion rover has been delivered to a 6 by 7 kilometer ellipse on Mars, 2,000 million kilometers from here. 4 minutes after that rover touches ground, 11 minutes after the spacecraft first entered the Martian atmosphere, here on Earth, we will receive the first signals that this process is starting. This isn't made up. This has happened twice in our lifetimes. We are going back about a regular day. Maybe you're having dinner, and this was happening. This isn't science fiction. This is ridiculous, and this is robotics. We have done this. We have done this, and you can't fail at this when you do this. This is a $2 billion rover full of a nuclear reactor. This is how we've landed Curiosity and Perseverance specifically. It's called the Skycrane Entry, Descent, and Lander stage. And this is what robotics does, right? And I don't see any way that you can argue that going from 1,500 kilometers per hour to 0 in 3 kilometers in 7 minutes is inching forward. This is a success of our field, and this is what our field can do.
Thank you, John. All right. I will let Matt have the last word after that.
I like to start off with sort of an analogy. If robotics was traveling at the same pace as AI, I think we would have robotic butlers. And I really want to have robotic butlers. I want robots that can make my coffee, help me get dressed, sing songs, paint. I think that sort of exemplifies like where AI is right now, in particular large language models. But I want to also say that, like, I don't disagree with anything that the other team is saying. Like, the problems that are being faced by both robotics and AI are hard. Now, I don't think it is a problem that robotics is traveling slower or is not moving as fast as AI, because it gives us time. And we have the luxury of time of working out issues such as ethics, issues such as sustainability, safety. How do we get people to adopt robots? There have been plenty of stories in the news where people have rejected robots. And the most common example I like to cite is Digidog, which is the New York Police Department's robot dog that they use for surveillance. Like, people thoroughly rejected that robot. But we have time to study how we can better integrate robotics with society and in ways that people will accept. And having that luxury of time will eventually give us the edge, I find. So.
Okay, thank you, Matt. All right. Now's the time when we go back to our QR code. If you have a paper in front of you, you can use your phone to vote. Has your decision, or your opinion rather, changed? Is AI skyrocketing while robotics inches forward? It was an overwhelming yes, I think, in the first instance. We'll see whether that's changed. And then we'll go to you to ask your questions, give your opinions. Uh-oh. I can't see the screen, but I think I know what's happening. Have we not just had a reversal? Wow. Now I'm really wanting to hear from the yes people in the audience, and even the people who were on the other side, maybe, and then switched their opinion. Has it stabilized yet? Are we good to go? All right, so the floor is yours, audience. We got questions at the back. We'll go to Jefferson, I think, and then I'll let Ramsey sort of pick the speakers as we go.
All right, thanks for the debate. It was awesome. I have a question about changing the scope, actually reducing a little bit, because I think the question is too broad. It's difficult to compare, like apples and bananas. So I'm going to reduce it just a little bit and ask the question about AI applied to robotics, because we're comparing like LLMs and robotics. And my question is, why isn't, when AI is applied to robotics, not performing better or much better than classical algorithms in many of those applications? In that case, I think it's more fair to compare, I guess.
So your question is why?
When AI is applied to robotics,
yeah,
it doesn't perform much better than when we have like classical algorithms in, I don't know, motion planning control, and all other perceptions and everything.
So you're claiming it doesn't perform better?
Yeah, for example, we have Spot, which is an amazing robot, doesn't have any AI, and it performs amazingly. So that's my question.
Okay, who wants to take that one on?
Can I?
Go for it, Yue.
I think there's a lack of definition here of what does perform better mean, in the sense that if you didn't have computer vision algorithm, could your robots identify objects in the space? It couldn't. Like, what's your classic algorithm there for? You don't have a classic algorithm that can do that, right? Like, I think some of the AI has unlocked some of the robotics capabilities, and I fully agree that I also found the topic a little bit unfair in terms of comparison because AI is so much broader than robotics itself in certain like application domains. It's like we can talk about LLM and then say, oh, my robot can do this, and this is not really comparable. But saying that AI is not performing better when applied to robots with respect to classic methods is a bit of an ambiguous way of putting it because better is not properly defined in this context. Like, are you saying that I mean, I think then you need to narrow it down even further. For example, you talk about motion planning. Then we can say, okay, my classic motion planning, whatever you're using, is giving me a more stable path in a faster time. With respect to, I don't know, using reinforcement learning to do the same thing, I can agree. But I back then to certain other things that we just couldn't do before, right? Like if we didn't have AI, like if I just want to give voice commands to my robots, either you hard code it and then you still have to do voice recognition, which falls back into the AI domain. So I just find, we can't directly do that comparison, not even at that level. You have to go even further in a more detailed level.
Okay, anybody else got a thought on that? No? Otherwise, we go to the next question.
And more of a comment that excellent presentation and excellent arguments made on both sides. I was initially very pro AI with the investment data that was presented, but I think the no side of the robotics provided some excellent insights to a lot of the robotics are in industrial settings, not the house as much, so therefore they're not seen as visibly, they're not talked about as much every day, but very much, Ocado, the Walmart, the Amazon, all the robotics in industrial settings are very much making some huge leaps. I mean, ClearPath that was exhibiting downstairs is doing leaps and bounds and some really impressive things. So thank you for the arguments on both sides. And like I said, I think it's the awareness or the flip may be that some of the robotics are not as prevalent in our everyday life, but they are huge in our secondary influences on our lives. Thank you for that.
Thanks. Jeff here at the...
I'll get John first.
Oh, John, okay.
I was listening to a podcast this morning driving to Kingston from the Toronto area. I got about a quarter way through of Lex Friedman's interview with Elon Musk. It's 8 hours long, so if you're a fan, it's great. If you're not, then you probably won't listen to it. But they touched on robotics, and of course, Elon, amongst all the other things he's doing, is trying to build humanoid robots. And he said they're spending about 50% of their engineering budget on the hand, just on the hand. And anyway, as I listened to him talking, it was kind of inspirational, and I just wonder what roboticists are thinking about humanoid robots, where their place is, at what point they will kind of emerge as a thing. I mean, it's a little fanciful today, but we see some pretty impressive examples of different labs building human-like robots that are really mimicking people. Where do you see that going?
Yeah, Ina?
Well, I can say maybe a couple of things. It's not my field, but so humanoid robotics actually I think is like we're seeing it taking off. The number of startup companies is really high, and the investment, a lot of investment is going into humanoid robotics. And I think the motivation is that, ultimately our physical spaces are set up for humans, right? So if we want robotics to come into our lives, then these robots have to negotiate the same stairs and the elevators and the tables and whatever is set up in our infrastructure, which is everything is set up for humans. So I think there's a lot of kind of buzz in robotics community around humanoids right now, and a lot of excitement, and a lot of people are saying, finally it's happening, right? People started working on humanoids decades ago, but now we're really seeing this part of robotics taking off. So I think there's a lot of promise and excitement around humanoids.
Anyone else? Yeah, general purpose robotics, to even broaden it, as opposed to, you know, in AI, general purpose AI, now general purpose robotics. Yeah, John.
It's also not directly my field. I would liken it, though, a lot to self-driving cars 10 years ago. I should also preface it by saying I'm sometimes a pessimist in that I think there's a lot of hype and there's a lot of excitement, but robotics as a field, we have a bit of a, I don't know if it's the most unique property, but it can be very quick to get to a demo and a very long way to go from a demo to a product. And that's because a lot of our problems, you know, need like high reliability and a demo doesn't. And I think people were saying at the time, I think there was concerns that self-driving car got in front of their skis a little bit on what they were, how close they said they were things. And I'm concerned sometimes that cycle might be repeating with the humanoid stuff. But I share your excitement with the long-term view of it, and certainly the necessity to research it. I'm just not sure if some of the people who have financial interests in pitching it are the most realistic about where we are with it.
Great. Jeff?
Yeah, just a little observation, and thank you both for a wonderful debate. I was a yes, I switched over to a no, thanks to the debate. And one other thing I'm going to point out as an observation that I think might flip a few more people is thanks for the examples that extend kind of the definition of where we see robotics, but we don't see AI. Because of the hype, it's easy to look at everything today and say, now that has AI in it, now that has AI in it. But I think we're forgetting the more classic examples like, you know, smart devices, sensors in your phones. We've been talking about the rise of 3D printers over the last few years. These are all robots using robot technology. And so if you start to say, where is it and how does it appear? I think the debate might shift. And I don't know if anyone has a comment on that. Thank you.
Anyone?
I would like to comment on that. So I see it as a dual development in the sense that thanks to sensors, we can collect data, and thanks to data processing, we can use those sensors. So I think they are complementing each other, and I like to see that they are evolving together. And I'm totally a robotics person in the sense that I do robotics research, right? So I got loved by robots. But I do have to admit that, you know, sometimes I feel like we have the sensors, we have the hardware, we're having a hard time using that hardware to do some things. And now some of the machine learning that is pushing forward is giving us an additional opportunity to make use of the hardware that we had. And I think back also to the question of humanoid robots, when I was doing my PhD on humanoid robots, we didn't have you know, applications of machine learning algorithms on humanoids just because, you know, we're more worried about how to make them stand without falling, right? That was a problem for us at the time. And I'm not talking about infinite, I'm talking about 10 years ago, but fast forward 10 years, now you see people like Tesla and other companies, you know, we have Sanctuary AI here in Canada that are boosting their humanoid technologies. And part of that is because they have more advanced algorithms to make that happen. But at the same time, without the hardware, obviously nothing can happen.
Yeah, good comment. Okay.
I would say that you correctly identified that the question of what a robot is an open and unsolved question even for roboticists.
Very good point.
I just want to say I was one of the ones that switched, and it was the Mars story. Oh my goodness! But really, I don't know what's going on, right? We don't know the hidden things that are occurring. The only panelist that kind of touched on something that I think I'd like to hear more of is this backlash about robots and kind of the public. Is that real? Is that something that could be playing at robots not being accepted? Is it a fallacy? What's going on?
So there's been a few examples of the public not accepting robots. I'm not sure exactly what caused them to not accept them. So one example is Digidog, which is, I believe, recently been reintroduced by the NYPD in a slightly different manner. But the other one, which Josh and I had talked about at length, is Tiny Mile, which used to be in Toronto, and then the city of Toronto just decided they didn't want Tiny Mile operating within the city anymore, possibly due to public outcry at the amount of space that these robots were taking up on the sidewalks, the amount of inconvenience that they were causing. And we're also seeing this more and more with, let's say, autonomous vehicles as well, where there's heavily cited examples from Cruise, where Cruise vehicles in the Bay Area caused, or sorry, I think it was Texas, caused traffic jams. And people did not want to have to accept that as the new norm. So we are seeing instances of outcry from the public against some robotic technologies, but I believe that if more carefully introduced, that a lot of this backlash could be mitigated. People have very, very polarizing opinions on robotics, and I think we, as roboticists, we kind of only see one side of that. We don't see the public side of that, but I mean, that's where we need to do more studies, and we need to do more research on how we can get people to accept this technology that's going to be more prevalent in our lives. And so that's what we're really working on right now.
Josh.
Go ahead, Ina.
Yeah, I sort of want to give you a counterexample. So I spent a few weeks in Los Angeles in April, and there you regularly see the little robot driving on the sidewalks on 4 wheels, many of them. Well, many of them, not like hordes of them, but certainly you see them at reasonable frequency, and they're delivering food, delivering stuff. And it's interesting to hear you say that these things were not accepted in Toronto. I think the reason they're accepted in Los Angeles because nobody walks in LA, everybody drives. So the sidewalks are totally available for these robots. So it just goes to show you that, you know, there's so many local and cultural and, you know, kind of local, the local environment can make it a go or no go, just like this. Yeah.
Yeah, I lived in Sweden in 2016, 2017, and I felt like every second house had a robot lawnmower. That was a while ago now, right? And I came back here, nobody still has, I don't know how many people have a robot lawnmower in the room, but I don't yet, but everybody had one there at the time. So I think you're right, there are regional differences somehow that play into the acceptance of robots in human spaces, but we're gonna get into this in the next few years. I'm looking at Amy because we're starting a research project on just this. So. ATMs as a robot. Is it a robot? Is it not a robot? The panel.
I could buy the 3D printer because at least it has some moving parts and sensors and actuators, yeah. But ATM.
Yeah.
ATM on wheels.
Sophie has the microphone.
Hi, thank you to all of you for your discussions today. It was really interesting. One thing that stood out to me about what you guys are saying is that the no side, you guys were talking about all these new applications for robotics. So we're like expanding what robots can do. When we talk about AI, we really only talk about like large language models. And so what's the equivalent to that for AI? Like what are we, like AI research has been focused on making LLMs better. What's the equivalent to expanding AI? What do you guys think we could do that's new and not just improving on what we already have? And maybe this is a better question for someone who is in AI, so maybe someone from the audience could answer it better, but curious to hear your thoughts.
Good question. I think it's for the yes side, because you were arguing so strongly that AI is pushing forward. So what is the next
We need
innovation?
someone in AI to come to answer this question. We have a panel here entirely made of roboticists. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, so to highlight some of the work of our own researchers at Ingenuity Labs, I think one of the more interesting applications of AI is the interpretation of laws and regulations through AI. And to basically have AI look through legal precedent to come up with ways to either construct an argument and to convince someone like a judge that to take their side, or to even present a summary of cases that would allow a judge to make a decision. I think that's some pretty interesting stuff where we're actually using AI, or could be using AI in legal decision making. Yeah, which is, I think, an exciting new area.
And we do have a research project, Ingenuity Labs, related to that very thing. So that's interesting. Yeah. Who has the microphone? Oh, Nikita. Okay. Do you have a question, Nikita, or are you passing the microphone around?
Passing it on.
All right, we got one up front. Yeah.
Hi, a lot of great points today. It was great hearing from everybody. One of the things we've heard a couple things about is perception. And just to tie this all back to where we started this whole debate with that one tweet about I would rather have an AI do my laundry and dishes than write poetry and make art. And someone had made a point about how the doing laundry and dishes sounds more like a robotic domain. I think we can all agree that the headline of "This robot folds clothes" is nowhere near as flashy as that of "This AI can write poetry." So my question for the panel is kind of twofold. It's, first of all, is the discrepancy between both sides here kind of built upon this perception of what success means for AI versus for robotics? And the other half of that is the progression of AI skyrocketing because successes in AI are so flashy, like, every other week you see this new picture generated by this, or this new song, or this new deep fake, compared to a robotics advancement might just be, we have better obstacle clearance on my path planner.
Okay, is it in the eye of the beholder, right?
I can try to address that. So I think the first thing that I thought about like your second question is somehow people seem to be more lenient towards AI in the sense that we somehow prefer AI to robotics, in the sense that when you see headlines about AI, it's mostly positive things that are happening. When you see things about robots, it's like robots killed or injured, factory worker at Tesla, and I'm like, or the robot did this damage, did that damage. Somehow, I think a lot of the media is depicting robotics as more damaging factor rather than a positive factor. Like we're nurturing this image of robots being terminators instead of being, good things that exist in society. While for AI, for some reason, I feel like, except for the movie Her, right? I think we know about that one. Most of the media coverage on AI is mostly positive. That's my personal feeling. It also feels a bit more accessible in a way to people. Like, the general public has more tangible access to AI. Like we talk about this, like, and I think someone also brought it up earlier, that a lot of the robotics is not directly seen by the general public, while the AI is directly exposed in front of your eyes. Like, you have access to your voice assistant, you have access to ChatGPT, it's free for use. And all of these things are like, you can use them directly, but you don't have the same direct access to robotics devices. Except for your Roomba, possibly, but even that is, somehow a costly device, while literally open the browser and you can use AI. So I think a bit of discrepancy comes from there. And then there's let's say what I would call the media steering things in one way or the other.
Thanks, Yue. Anyone else?
I
John.
think it's fair to say that the field of AI has been better at marketing than robotics. I mean, it's in the name. Their field is called artificial intelligence, right? That is a really big claim. It could be called statistical inference. It'd be called a bunch of things. It's called artificial intelligence and machine learning are the two most common terms. And those are large terms. Those are large claims of terms. We call our field robotics. Those are, robotics obviously has a lot of cachet to it as well. I think, and I don't actually have an opinion about whether one side is overreaching or one side is underreaching, but there's certainly a disparity in in the two different fields marketing, for lack of a better term.
Great, thanks. Yeah, last question. Do we have the mic?
Okay, so thank you so much for this debate. I think I changed my mind in the thing that made me change my mind is the perception, I think. So I think robotics, like I think John explained a little bit about the perception that we have on AI. And I just want to raise one concern that I saw a lot of talking about, oh, how AI is good, how AI doesn't have, of course, that there's some concerns raised. And I know that, I think it's well known that AI is being used in warfare, for example, to select targets. So I think in the ethics, I want to raise this concern with everybody that we have to be responsible. We have to have more regulations maybe, but it's not everything like it's well, like, how can I explain that? It's not everything is good. Like you have to actually think a little bit better on if it's positive or not, right?
Thank you. I think we have to kind of come to a wrap. I think our vision of everything in the future that moves is going to be a robot is probably going to require both AI and robotics to come together in a really strong way. Please join me in thanking our panelists for getting up here and debating a really tough topic.